this is Downfall. I haven't done a video in a while. It's been a busy late summer, and yeah, so I've been up to my neck trying to get caught up in Vassal projects, but we got Downfall on the table because I'm planning to do a Vassal module here for this, and I want to know intimately how it plays. It's a Chad Jensen game, and it is magnificent. I remember seeing one of the earliest prototypes of this before it was like ready to be played. I think Chad and Kai brought it to Tempe one year before I'd moved to Montana, and I got to see it at that game convention back in the days when I was able to attend game conventions. Anywho's, got it on the table here. Let me just, first of all, a lot of people are just saying it's huge, it won't fit on my table. Guys, this is it's two map sheets side by side, and I mean, there's a lot of games a lot bigger than this. I would not call this huge. It's a large game, maybe. I would say that. I don't have an enormous gaming table. I think it's 5 feet long by 4 feet tall. It's a kitchen. It's an old kitchen table we used to have. So this does not take up a whole lot of space. I've got two poster-sized sheets of plexiglass to lay it flat because it does not have a mounted map board. You can, I believe, order one. I think they did make a mounted map for it if you want to go that route. Mounted boards always work for me, so I prefer the paper and the plexi. Anyways, we got it on the table here. The game pieces are awesome. They come pre-rounded for you. The half-inch counters I did round using the Oregon laminates tool. Those would be cut square, but these are pre-rounded. They punch really nice. These, I think, are 5/8 inch counters, half-inch counters, and then you have long counters. If you play GBOH, they're kind of like that, or the ships from the naval game. I can't remember the Flying Colors is the name of it from GMT. So that's the size pieces that you got in the game, and here's what makes the game so cool. It is a two-player game of World War II in Europe. It's not Axis and Allies. Here's the wild part. One player is going to play the West, and by the West we mean the UK, the United States, Canada, and everybody else that was on the Western side against the Nazis. Over on the other side of the game, you have the player that's playing the Soviets. So it's really the Soviets against the West, and the premise is the Germans are going to lose. So each side, instead of having a bot to manage the Germans, each of the two factions will control half of the Germans. So the player who's playing the West, that is the UK, the United States, and others, they're going to be controlling the Germans that are facing the Soviets. The OKH, Oberkommando des Heeres. And then the player that plays the Soviets is going to control the Germans who are facing the Western Allies, or OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. So all of the pieces, the art on it flows with this so as to show you which factions you control. So for example, the Western powers, the NATO symbol is always going to have a black logo to it. Okay, so the British, the Americans, you can see the flags on it to show the nationality. Notice the NATO symbol is black on the inside. Black is always going to be facing up against white. Right? Soviets got a white NATO symbol, and they're facing Germans with black symbol. And then the German allies that are going to be aligned with the OKH are also going to have the black interior NATO symbol. So the Bulgarians, the Romanians, I think we have some Hungarians here, and there is one Italian piece. So the Italians are kind of a dark blue in this game. So there's Italians controlled by the OKW, but the ones that fought on the Eastern Front are controlled by OKH. And so the art and everything really works with that. How does it end up playing? You know, if you're playing from 1942 until 1945, it might be a little boring to play the West in some games because you don't have a whole lot to do until you can get your forces built up to do something. This game here, I've heard that comment made. I'm like, that makes no sense to me. I don't know how you can play this game and say it's boring to play the West, because if you're playing the West, while you may not have a whole lot that you're going to do on the land here, you are doing a number of things. But set all that aside. You're controlling all of these guys, you're going to be busy as the Western player because you gotta control the Nazis that are facing up against the Soviets. And what you're trying to do is slow the Soviets down so that you can conquer more victory spaces, which are these red hexagons all over the map. You're trying to get more of those than the Soviets before the end of the war. In other words, you're trying to win the war and position your side for the best post-war situation after the conflict has ended. Western allies also got to manage a number of strategic tracks like the Siege of Malta, the Battle of the Atlantic, and strategic bombing. And you're going to use your precious orders commands to do strategic warfare, and you gain benefits by moving this into your favor. Once it's in your favor and you have the advantage, then you're going to get a victory location, which is the equivalent to one of the locations on the map. You also gain long-term benefits. Your fleets become stronger on this particular display. For example, over here in the Siege of Malta, you're going to gain the benefit of, I think... on this one here, yeah, you get strength modifiers for your naval forces in the Mediterranean, and you also remove fleets. As this moves over, fewer and fewer fleets become available to the Axis in the Mediterranean. Similarly, the U-boats start to disappear from the Atlantic by controlling that. Over here, your Air Force units become more powerful as you successfully bomb Germans. So right now, the Allies are not doing well in the strategic bombing campaign in the West. But they do have some other things going for them. I'll show you in just a second. So the flow of the game is really simple. The game does include cards. You have a deck of advantage cards, but this is not a card-driven game. The cards give you special advantages, much like fighting formations. In fact, there's a number of things in this game that remind me of fighting formations, albeit this is at a strategic level. You're going to gain these cards from time to time in the game. You can hold as many of them as you want in your hand, and you play them when appropriate according to the card text. And the advantage is on the card itself, and these things are going to supplement your ordinary gameplay. The ordinary gameplay is driven from this display here. Now, each player is going to have a display of order tokens. So for the West, you have your display of possible order tokens, and as you play them, they go onto this display, showing that they're no longer available for this particular turn. In other words, you've already used it. You also have a planning slot where you can put one token, set it aside for use at a later time. In other words, it's going to be off the menu of options that you're going to be drawing from here, but you can always take it at any time and use it and put it back on your display. So all the forces controlled by the West are on this set of displays here. And all of those for Soviets are on this display. And the only nit I have with the map, I almost want to cut that out and rearrange it so it's face up from my perspective. But I get it. In a normal situation, you'd be sitting across the table from one another. I have an unusual gaming space, so I have to read that upside down. It's not been a problem so far. The action track is where you're going to pull these things off of. And you pull the orders off. So if I'm the OKW, for example, I need to look for the dark gray tokens. The first one I have is here. This is the lowest one on the display. I can play that order. If I choose to not play that order, I could play another one above it, but I'm going to pay an additional cost for each of the tokens that I could play on this display that's below the one I'd select. I have to pay an additional what's called initiative cost. And that's what this numbered track is. It goes all the way around the perimeter of the board. There's an initiative track with an initiative marker for each side, each faction. And those initiative markers are going to move. Whoever has the leftmost marker, and if they're stacked, who's at the bottom of the stack has the initiative and gets to go. It's their turn. All right. So what you're going to do when it's your turn is you're going to take a marker off of this display. I'm going to choose the command confusion, or excuse me, command failure token. I'm going to spend this particular order for the OKW. And what this is going to do is, first of all, it's going to cost me some initiative to play this. It's going to cost me 2 initiative. And how much initiative it costs is easily found on this display. It's a play aid. So each player will get one of these. So you'll be able to see not only what you can do, but what your opponents can do. And everything's explained on here. So you won't have to be fumbling with the rule book very much at all. So I happen to know what this one does. It's going to cost 2 initiative. And then I'm going to roll a die and the die roll result is going to negatively impact the initiative placement of the OKH faction. Now remember, I'm the Soviet player, and I'm controlling the Germans facing the west here. All right. And now the reason I'm playing this command is I need to move my Soviet front line closer to the Germans here so I can launch some attacks. And I want to slow them down. I want to be able to get multiple orders before they can get a single order in to respond to what I'm about ready to do. So I'm actually going to use the Germans in order to accomplish that a little bit. Now that sounds hokey and gamey, but let me tell you, the end result of this schizophrenic, dysfunctional way of waging war that you're going to see the Germans doing here, it's awfully close to reality. In fact, it's one of the closest things to reality I've seen in an operational game at this scale. So this is actually a really cool mechanic, and it really works for this particular game. So I put that on my display there. I pay the initiative, putting my token on top of whatever is pre-positioned there, showing that I am the leftmost, but I'm at the top of the stack, which means counters underneath me are going to get to go first. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a die. I roll that die, and I rolled a 5. That was a good roll. So then I'm going to take the OKH and move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you'll see some spaces on the track that say event. If a marker passes a spot that says event, and it's aligned with the same faction, like if this was an OKH event that this thing just moved past, I would flip the marker over, showing that at the end of their next turn, when it's their turn to go, at the end of their activation segment, they're going to go through a process that's going to shift some event cards. There's a deck of events, and this is a current event, discard pile, and upcoming event. And so what's going to happen is all of these are going to be cycled. This card's going to get discarded to the top of the discard pile. The upcoming card becomes current, and its event is executed. And then a new card will be drawn, and then you look at the symbols up at the top. And what you're going to do is each faction that has a card symbol there is going to get to draw an action card. You ignore the event for now, and then whatever text is at the bottom that's applicable when the card is face up applies. The symbols for the Air Force units here show you how many Air Force markers can be active on the map, and they can also then be repositioned however the player likes within the confines of the rules. And what those are going to do is basically impart an air superiority over a number of hexes according to the number in the white hexagon on the counter. So air superiority is going to fluctuate as the game goes on. It's a clever mechanic to show the air game, the tactical air war, without a lot of rules weight. It's telling a story without having to bog the game down with a lot of minutia. So that's basically how the game's going to flow. Once you're finished up with your order, the next player is going to get to go. The first thing that he's going to do in his turn is he's going to look for the weather marker. Where's the weather marker? Now, if the current weather marker is to the left of the current player's initiative token, you move it to the same space as your token, you roll 2 dice, and that's how far that marker will move up the track. So that marker is just going to take this herky-jerky motion all the way around the track, and occasionally it's going to pass these weather checkpoints. Once it passes a checkpoint, the weather is going to change, and what the weather is going to be is dictated by the current turn. So the turn will show you the different weather periods, and right now it's going to be snow no matter what. But some of these it'll say fair or mud. And so if you need to, once that thing passes a weather checkpoint, you might need to update the current weather by just putting the current weather on the top of the stack. Some areas of the map, like Egypt and Libya, are going to have permanent fair weather. But remember, Libya is not Tunisia. So pay attention to the details in here, especially when it comes to the countries. So this is basically how the game works. It is not a highly complex game. It's very interactive, very little downtime, a lot of back and forth, and it tells a cool story, and it clearly allows for alt history opportunities. As the OKW, I neglected to build up the proper defenses in the Netherlands, and the opportunity presented itself for the Allies to land here instead of in Sicily in mid-1943. Now, I got enough shipping points to eventually land in Sicily, and that is important because that's the only way that you're going to be able to knock the Italians out of the war. So there is a reason to still do that. So that's why I went into Sicily. But we opened up a front here already in the west and are knocking on the door of Berlin. And one of the things that allowed for that was just the way that orders were structured on here. The positioning of the initiative markers allowed for the West to have multiple goes before the OKW could respond effectively. And then the weather turned, which made their counterattacks ineffectual. And so the Allies were then, once it turned to snow, were able to break out and extend the perimeter a little bit. So very neat game. I really am enjoying this one. I really like this one. There's obviously there's going to be more to it than this. I may have misstated some things. There's partisans in the game. There's and they play an important role in the game. There's rules for supply that are just very cleverly woven into the events deck. The events deck is going to shift as different checkpoints are made by the players. The event will tell you to, hey, remove this card, insert a new card from the game into here. It's going to change the conditions a little bit. And the Soviets, you're going to find, are going to gradually gain parity with the Wehrmacht, which is about what's happened now. End of 1943, and they're fighting on even terms just about with the Soviets. And so I really like how it's modeling things at this scale. I really can't think of anything I would criticize about it other than I wish that display was upright. That's literally the only thing I can think of. Fantastic game. Chad Jensen design that John Butterfield helped to put the finishing touches on. But this is a fantastic game. It might be. I was talking to a friend about this. I'm like, this might be the best ETO game I have ever played. Now, I really like Cataclysm, and Unconditional Surrenders would probably be my top game of ETO at this scale. But I think this one's pushing Unconditional Surrender into second place. This is a really solid game design. You should definitely check it out. It's going to sell out, I guarantee you. So I'm Joel Toppin. Hope you enjoyed the video. All right, so one more thing I forgot to mention about this display is that when it's your turn to go, after you check for the weather, everything slides down, preserving its order, and then you're going to fill a new token in here, or if there's multiple empty spaces, which can happen when you're near the end of a turn, which is when the weather marker is way around here, you might start running out of tokens on this display. When it's your turn to go, you replenish from this cup as much as is able, and basically you're going to need like a big soup bowl or something that you can blindly draw out of, and you're going to draw tokens out one at a time and place them sight unseen when you draw it. You know, look in and select something, you draw it randomly, and you stick it in there. So in this case here, we drew one out for OKW, and now we're going to pull out another, and it's another it's a command, or it's a materiel shortage, and these markers are double-sided, so they can be played by either faction, but I'm pretty sure that the OKW will not be able to play that because they've already played a material shortage, so that marker there will only be available to the OKH faction because OKW's already played one of those. And it's similar to command failure. It's going to cost either initiative of the other German faction, or it's going to force them to discard a card from their hand. So again, Downfall, awesome game. Be sure and check it out.